Ambassador Jiwon Kim stood in the Grand Council chamber and felt smaller than ever. The chamber was massive, built to hold representatives from 47 different species. Above her head, a holographic display showed the entire known galaxy spinning slowly in blue light. She had stood here many times before, always in the lower section where the junior members presented their requests. Today would be no different. Jiwon stepped forward and began her presentation. She had prepared it carefully over many months. Charts and numbers appeared in the air around her, showing everything humanity had done for the Galactic Council over the past year. Human engineers maintained communication relays on 32 worlds. Human coordinators managed 60% of all trade routes. Human mediators had resolved over 2,000 disputes between different species. The data was clear and impossible to argue with. Humans had become essential to keeping galactic civilization running smoothly. Jiwon concluded her presentation with a simple request. After 40 years of service, humanity wanted a seat in the Inner Council. They wanted voting rights on major decisions. They wanted recognition as equal partners. High Counselor Vexith barely looked up from his datapad. He was a Kalar, one of the oldest species in the galaxy. His kind had been traveling between stars when humans were still living in caves. He waved one long hand dismissively. "Your request is denied," he said. His voice was cold and bored. "Humanity is too young. You have been part of galactic society for only 200 years. Many species here have histories spanning thousands of years. You should be grateful we allow you to participate at all." Counselor Thrin laughed. She was from the Vrellan species, insect-like beings who lived in massive hive structures. "Humans do good work," she said, her mandibles clicking with amusement. "But so do our cleaning drones. Should we give them council seats too?" Other counselors joined in the laughter. Jiwon stood very still, her face showing nothing. She had expected this. She had hoped for better, but she had expected exactly this. She thanked the council politely and left the chamber. That evening, Jiwon met with her core team in the human diplomatic compound. Chief Engineer Doyen Park was there, looking tired. He ran a hand through his gray hair and pulled up a holographic display of his own. "We maintain critical systems on 47 worlds," Doyen said quietly. "Power grids, water purification, atmospheric processors, communication networks. They pay us like contractors, not partners. We do the work that keeps their worlds running, and they treat us like hired help." Captain Hyeri Cho nodded. She was younger than the others, but she had worked her way up to command the Human Merchant Coordination Network. "Trade routes are the same," she said. "We handle the complex coordination between dozens of species. Different fuel requirements, different navigation systems, different cultural protocols. We make it all work. But we get none of the credit and none of the authority." Dr. Minho Yoon was the last to speak. He handled cultural mediation, helping different species understand each other. "I resolved 15 disputes this month alone," he said. "Conflicts that would have escalated into trade wars or worse. The council mediators only handle the big cases. We quietly fix hundreds of small problems before they become big ones, and nobody notices." Jiwon looked at each of them. These were some of the best people humanity had. Smart, dedicated, patient. They had given decades of their lives to serving the galactic community, and the council saw them as nothing more than useful tools. "This is the 23rd year in a row," Jiwon said slowly. 23 times I have presented our case. 23 times they have said no. Our contributions grow larger every year. Their respect for us never changes. So what do we do?" Hyeri asked. "Keep trying? Get angry? Demand they listen?" Jiwon shook her head. "No, we leave." The room went silent. Minho leaned forward. "Leave? You mean withdraw from the council completely?" "Yes," Jiwon said. "Quietly, professionally, no anger, no demands, no ultimatums. We simply finish our current contracts and go home. All of us. Every human engineer, coordinator, mediator, and diplomat. We leave them to run things themselves." Doyen's eyes widened. "That would be catastrophic for them. Do you know how many systems depend on human maintenance? They have no idea how much we actually do." "Exactly," Jiwon said. "They will never see our value while we are here. Some people need to lose something before they understand what they had." Minho stood and paced the room. "This feels wrong. We should fight for recognition. We should make them listen." "We have been fighting for 40 years, Jiwon replied. "Fighting quietly with patience and excellent work. It has not worked. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away with dignity." Hyeri smiled slightly. "They really have no idea, do they? They think we are replaceable. They will learn, Doyen said. He pulled up his files, already thinking about logistics. We need to be thorough. Document everything. Offer training to anyone who will listen. Leave detailed manuals. When this falls apart, I want it to be clear that we gave them every chance to learn. Over the next week, they planned what they called Operation Silent Dawn. Every human in council space would be notified. They would have 90 days to prepare. During that time, they would maintain their usual excellent standards. They would offer to train replacements. They would document every process and system, and then they would leave. On the final day, Jiwon returned to the council chamber. She submitted humanity's official withdrawal notice. The document was thick, hundreds of pages detailing every function humans currently performed. Power systems they maintained, trade routes they coordinated, disputes they mediated, communication networks they repaired, medical systems they monitored. The list went on and on. High Counselor Vexith glanced at the first page and set it aside. This is unnecessary drama, he said. No species is irreplaceable. We managed before humans arrived. We will manage after you leave. Of course, Jiwon said politely. We simply wanted to ensure a smooth transition. The document contains all the information you will need. We have our own experts, Counselor Thrin said. Human labor has been convenient, but hardly essential. Jiwon bowed slightly and left. As she walked out, she saw one junior analyst actually reading the document. His name was Kelix, another Kelar like the High Counselor. He looked young and worried. He glanced up at Jiwon as she passed, his expression troubled. Later that day, Kelix took the document to his supervisor. Sir, you need to read this. The humans maintain critical systems across dozens of worlds. If they all leave at once, his supervisor waved him off. Temporary labor shortages are normal. We will hire new contractors. Stop wasting time on this and focus on important matters. Kelix wanted to argue, but he was too junior to push back. He filed the document and tried to ignore the sick feeling in his stomach. 90 days. That was all the time left before humanity walked away. The countdown had begun and the council did not even notice. The withdrawal began on the Vrelin homeworld. Chief Engineer Doyen Park stood in the main control room of the planetary infrastructure network. Around him, dozens of screens showed power grids, water systems, and atmospheric processors. Everything was running smoothly as it always did when humans were in charge. His team of engineers worked quietly at their stations. They had spent the last 2 months documenting every system they maintained. Now they were conducting training sessions for the Vrelin engineers who would replace them. The sessions were not going well. The atmospheric processor needs daily calibration, explained Yunji, one of the senior human engineers. She pointed to a complex display. You need to monitor these 3 readings and adjust the flow rates based on weather patterns. The Vrelin supervisor clicked his mandibles dismissively. Our automated systems can handle this. You humans overcomplicate everything. The machines were designed to run themselves. Yunji glanced at Doyen, who shook his head slightly. She had tried to explain that the automated systems had never worked correctly, that humans had been compensating manually for 20 years. But the Vrelin officials would not listen. They saw the machines running and assumed they were working automatically. Very well, Doyen said politely. All the documentation is in the system. If you need any assistance after we leave, you have our contact information. We will not need it, the supervisor said. Thank you for your service. You may go. As the human team packed their equipment, Doyen looked back at the control room one last time. He knew exactly what would happen. Within days, the atmospheric processor would start drifting out of calibration. Within weeks, it would fail completely. The Vrelin engineers would look at their manuals and not understand why the instructions did not work. They would try to contact humans for help. By then, humanity would be gone. Across the galaxy, Captain Hieri Cho supervised a different kind of withdrawal. She stood on the bridge of her coordination ship, watching displays that showed hundreds of trade routes. Each route was a delicate balance of timing, fuel requirements, and cultural protocols. The Kalar vessels require 6-hour priority windows at every jump point, she explained to the council trade official who would replace her. The Drakkar ships use a different kind of engine that creates interference, so they cannot share routes with Vrelin ships. And you need to schedule breaks for species who require specific rest periods. The official, a tall Kelar named Vethix, waved his hand. Our computer systems will manage the scheduling. This is why we have automation. Hieri pulled up another screen. The automation works for simple routes. But look at this. 3 different species arriving at the same junction point tomorrow. The computers will assign them slots in order of registration, but that puts a Drakkar ship right before a Vrellan ship. Their engine types will interfere with each other. Then they will work it out between themselves, Vethik said. Ship captains are professionals. They are also proud, Hieri replied quietly. Neither captain will want to yield. They will argue about protocol and honor. It will take days to resolve. Meanwhile, 50 other ships will be delayed waiting for the junction to clear. Vethix looked annoyed. Are you saying our captains are unprofessional? No, Hieri said carefully. I am saying that humans handle these conflicts before they happen. We know which species do not work well together. We adjust schedules to prevent problems. Your automation cannot do that. Then we will upgrade the automation, Vethik said. Thank you for your time. Hieri sighed and signed off. Her ship's crew began shutting down the coordination network they had built over decades. They left all the data intact for the council to use. But data was not the same as understanding. Dr. Minho Yoon closed his mediation office on a small trade station between 2 star systems. He had spent 15 years here, helping settle disputes between different species. Most of the conflicts were small. A misunderstanding about payment terms, a cultural offense that neither party realized they had committed. Yoon would meet with both sides, explain the context, and find a solution that honored everyone. Now he was handing his active cases over to a council mediator. The mediator looked at the files with barely hidden contempt. These are trivial matters. Why do they need mediation at all? The law is clear in each case. The law is clear, Yoon agreed. But sometimes following the law strictly makes things worse. Look at this case. 2 merchants arguing about a contract. Legally, the Kelar merchant is correct. But in Drakkar culture, the way the contract was written is insulting. If you just rule in favor of the Kelar, the Drakkar will feel dishonored and spread word that Kelar merchants are untrustworthy. That is not my concern, the mediator said. I enforce the law. And that is why conflicts escalate, Yoon said quietly. I would find a way to honor the contract and the Drakkar's dignity. Perhaps the Kelar pays the full amount, but the Drakkar provides a gift of equal value. Both sides walk away satisfied. The mediator looked puzzled. That seems unnecessarily complicated. It seems complicated until you factor in the cost of a trade war, Yoon replied. He handed over his files and left. Behind him, disputes that could have been solved easily would now grow into serious problems. Junior analyst Kellix watched it all from his office on Nexus Prime. He had access to tracking systems that showed human positions throughout council space. Every day more humans left. They departed from infrastructure facilities, trade stations, mediation offices, and diplomatic posts. The withdrawal was perfectly coordinated. He compiled reports showing the scale of the exodus. Nearly 400,000 humans were leaving. They had been scattered across 47 worlds, working in hundreds of different roles. Now they were all going home to human space. Kellix took his reports to his supervisor again. Sir, this is significant. We are losing massive amounts of expertise. The humans maintained critical infrastructure. They coordinated complex logistics. They prevented countless small problems from becoming large ones. His supervisor barely looked at the data. Labor comes and goes. We have dealt with workforce changes before. The systems will continue running. But sir, the documentation they left behind is adequate, I am sure. Kellix, you are young. You worry too much. The council has existed for thousands of years. We will survive the departure of one junior species. Kellix returned to his desk feeling helpless. He pulled up the human withdrawal documentation and read it carefully. Page after page detailed complex systems and delicate processes. Each entry showed how deeply integrated humans had become. They were not just contractors. They were the threads holding together the fabric of galactic civilization. But nobody else was reading these documents. Nobody else seemed concerned. On the final day of the 90-day withdrawal period, Ambassador Ji-won Kim boarded the last human shuttle leaving Nexus Prime. She stood at the window and looked back at the Grand Council chamber. Inside, High Counselor Vexith was conducting a normal session. The council was debating trade policies and border disputes, the usual business of galactic governance. No one came to see the humans off. No farewell ceremony, no speeches, no acknowledgement at all. It was as if humanity had never been there. Ji-won found that strangely appropriate. They had been invisible while doing the work. Now they were invisible while leaving. Perhaps that was the point. The Council had never really seen them at all. The shuttle joined a massive fleet of human vessels gathering at the edge of Council space. Hundreds of ships carrying hundreds of thousands of people. Engineers and coordinators and mediators and diplomats. All the quiet workers who had kept everything running smoothly. Doyen Park contacted Jiwan from his ship. All personnel accounted for. Everyone got out safely. No incidents. Good, Jiwan said. How long do you think it will take?
For them to notice we are gone?
Doyen was quiet for a moment. Days for the small things. Weeks for the medium things. Months before they understand the full scope. And will they ask us to come back? Doyen laughed, but there was no humor in it. Eventually. When they realize they cannot fix it themselves. But by then, Ambassador, it will be too late for simple apologies. The human fleet entered hyperspace, leaving Council space behind. In the void they left, systems continued running, for now. But cracks were already forming. Small problems beginning to compound. The quiet workers were gone, and soon everyone would know it. 3 months after humanity left, the first major crisis began. Communication relay stations across 23 star systems failed within hours of each other. Billions of people lost contact with other worlds. Trade ships could not coordinate with stations. Governments could not communicate with their colonies. Emergency services went dark. High Counselor Vexith called an emergency meeting. The council chamber filled with panicked officials. Everyone was talking at once, demanding explanations and solutions. How did this happen? Vexith demanded. These relays have been operational for decades. They should not all fail at once. The chief communications engineer stepped forward. He was a Kilar named Thexus, confident in his expertise. The relays require daily calibration to prevent harmonic interference. The calibration must be done manually because each relay has unique characteristics based on local stellar conditions. Then do the calibrations, Counselor Thrin snapped. Her mandibles clicked with irritation. We are trying, Thexus said. But the humans who used to do this work left detailed manuals. The manuals explain the process, but they do not explain the judgment calls. Each relay is different. You need to feel when something is wrong and adjust accordingly. Our engineers are following the instructions exactly, but the relays are not responding correctly. Vexith stared at him. Are you telling me that our engineers cannot perform basic maintenance? I am telling you the humans had decades of experience, Thexus replied carefully. They developed an intuitive understanding that cannot be taught from a manual. We need time to learn. We do not have time, Thrin said. Fix it now, but they could not fix it. Over the following weeks, some relays came back online. Others remained dark. Communication across the galaxy became unpredictable. The seamless network that everyone had taken for granted was broken. The communication failures were just the beginning. Trade routes descended into chaos next. Without human coordinators managing traffic, ships began arriving at junction points at the same time. Different species had different ideas about who had priority. Captain Vathix, the official who had replaced Captain Hyeri Cho, stared at his screens in disbelief. His automated systems were creating disasters. A Kalar merchant vessel and a Drakkar warship had both been assigned the same jump window. Both species considered themselves superior. Neither would yield. The standoff lasted 3 days. 50 other ships waited behind them, unable to proceed. Cargo spoiled. Passengers missed connections. Costs mounted. Finally, Vethix had to personally mediate the dispute, something that took hours of careful negotiation. And that was just one junction point. The same scene was playing out across hundreds of trade routes. Vethix worked 18-hour days trying to manage conflicts that seemed to arise constantly. He pulled up the logs from when humans ran the coordination network. They had handled 3 times as much traffic with half the incidents. How had they done it? Vethix read through Captain Cho's notes. She had tracked not just schedules but also cultural factors, ship captain personalities, and species-specific needs. She had constantly adjusted routes to prevent conflicts before they happened. The work was impossibly complex. Vethix had a team of 20 trying to do what Cho had managed with 5 humans. They were failing. The worst crisis hit the Frellin homeworld. The atmospheric processing system that Yunji and her team had maintained began to fail. Warning alarms sounded in the control center. Vrelin engineers rushed to their stations, pulling up the human documentation. The manuals were thorough. They explained every component of the system. They provided step-by-step troubleshooting guides. but they could not convey the deep understanding that came from 20 years of hands-on experience. The Vrellan engineers followed the instructions exactly. They adjusted the settings as specified. Nothing worked. The system continued to degrade. Oxygen levels in the northern hemisphere began to drop. Carbon dioxide was building up in the southern cities. Councillor Thrin contacted the council in a panic. "We need help. The atmospheric system is failing. Our population cannot breathe." Vexith sent a team of the council's best engineers. They came from 3 different species, all experts in environmental systems. They studied the Vrellan planet's processor for 2 weeks. They could not solve the problem. The issue was not any single component. It was how 12 different systems interacted with each other. The human engineers had understood these interactions instinctively. They had made tiny adjustments across multiple systems simultaneously, keeping everything balanced. The council engineers were trying to fix each system separately. It was not working. "Contact the humans," Thrin begged. "Offer them whatever they want. We need them back." Vexith sent messages to human space. They went unanswered. The Vrellan homeworld began emergency evacuations. Millions of Vrellan fled to colony worlds, leaving behind a planet that was slowly becoming uninhabitable. Meanwhile, diplomatic incidents multiplied. Without human mediators, small disputes escalated into serious conflicts. A cultural misunderstanding between 2 minor species sparked a trade embargo. A territorial disagreement turned into a military standoff. Species that had coexisted peacefully for decades were suddenly at each other's throats. The council mediators tried to handle the flood of cases, but they had been trained to deal with major diplomatic crises, not the hundreds of small conflicts that Dr. Yoon and his colleagues had quietly resolved. The mediators applied standard legal protocols. These solutions might be technically correct, but they often made the underlying tensions worse. Junior analyst Kellix watched all of this with growing horror. He had tried to warn them. He had compiled reports. He had shown the data. Nobody had listened. Now the galaxy was falling apart exactly as he had feared. He compiled a new report more comprehensive than before. He cross-referenced every failure with the human withdrawal documentation. The pattern was undeniable. Every single crisis traced back to a function humans had performed. Communication relays they maintained. Trade routes they coordinated. Systems they balanced. Conflicts they prevented. But the most disturbing discovery was how deeply integrated humans had been. They had not just maintained systems. They had often been the only ones who understood how different species technologies worked together. Kalar power grids interfacing with Vrellan water systems, interfacing with Drakkar communication networks. Humans had made it all compatible. Kellix took his report directly to High Counselor Vexith's office. He was breaking protocol again, but he did not care anymore. His supervisor tried to stop him, but Kellix pushed past. Vexith looked up in irritation. "Junior analyst, you are out of order." "High Counselor, you must read this," Kellix said, placing his report on the desk. "Every crisis we are facing is directly related to human departure. They were not just workers. They were the foundation of our entire civilization." Vexith wanted to dismiss him, but the communication failures, the trade chaos, the Vrellan evacuation, the diplomatic disasters, they were all happening at once. He looked at the young analyst and saw genuine fear in his eyes. "Leave the report," Vexith said quietly. "I will read it." That night, High Counselor Vexith read Kellix's report from beginning to end. Then he read the original human withdrawal documentation that he had dismissed 3 months earlier. He read Ambassador Kim's summary. He read Chief Engineer Park's system inventories. He read Captain Cho's coordination logs. He read Dr. Yoon's mediation case files. The scope of it was staggering. Humans had touched every aspect of galactic civilization. They had done it so quietly, so competently, that no one had noticed. They had made everything work so smoothly that everyone assumed it just worked naturally. Vexith had been so sure that no species was irreplaceable. He had been so confident in the Council's superiority. He had been so blind. By the time dawn broke over Nexus Prime, Vexith understood the terrible truth. The galaxy did not just need humans back. Without them, galactic civilization was going to collapse, and he had no idea if humanity would even answer his calls. 6 months after humanity's departure, the infrastructure collapse accelerated. Power grids failed on 7 council worlds in the same week. Water purification systems malfunctioned on a dozen more. Transportation networks ground to a halt. Medical facilities lost critical systems. What had been isolated problems became a cascade of failures. On the Kalar homeworld, the capital city went dark. Power stations that had run perfectly for 40 years suddenly stopped working. Kalar engineers swarmed the facilities, following every diagnostic procedure in their manuals. The equipment was functioning. All the components tested normal. Yet the grid would not stabilize. A senior engineer finally discovered the problem. The human maintenance teams had been manually balancing load distribution across 17 different power sources. The automated systems were supposed to do this, but they had bugs that made them unreliable. For decades, humans had compensated for these bugs without telling anyone. They had just made it work. Now, with no one compensating, the system was tearing itself apart. The Kalar engineers tried to fix the automation bugs, but the code was ancient and complex. It would take months to rewrite. Meanwhile, billions of Kalar citizens had no power. High Counselor Vexith stood in the dark council chamber, lit only by emergency lights. Around him, counselors from 47 species reported similar disasters on their homeworlds. The infrastructure humans had maintained was collapsing everywhere at once. "We must bring them back," Counselor Thrin said. Her voice had none of its former arrogance. The Vrellan homeworld was being evacuated, its atmosphere slowly poisoning billions of her people. Send them whatever terms they want. Full council membership, voting rights, economic benefits, anything. I have sent 17 messages to human space, Vexith said quietly. None have been answered. The chamber fell silent. The implications were clear. Humanity was not ignoring them out of spite. They were ignoring them because the council no longer mattered to human interests. The economic collapse was equally devastating. Galactic trade had dropped by 60%. Without human coordination, shipping costs had tripled. Delivery times were unpredictable. Shortages appeared on worlds that had never known scarcity. Captain Vethix had given up trying to manage the trade routes through the central coordination system. It was too broken. Instead, individual species were making bilateral agreements, creating private trade networks that bypassed council authority entirely. The unified galactic economy was fragmenting into dozens of smaller, isolated markets. Vethix pulled up the old logs one more time, studying Captain Hieri Cho's methods. She had somehow juggled hundreds of variables simultaneously. Species preferences, fuel requirements, captain personalities, political tensions, weather patterns, and 1,000 other factors. She had made it look easy because she was brilliant at it. Vethix was not brilliant at it. None of his team was. They were competent administrators trying to do the job of intuitive coordinators. It was like asking someone who could read music to improvise a jazz performance. The skills were completely different. The military situation was perhaps the most humiliating. Admiral Gorthak commanded the pride of galactic civilization, the Council Defense Fleet. Thousands of warships, the most advanced technology, the finest warriors from a dozen species. Unstoppable, except the fleet could not move. The logistics had collapsed completely. Fuel shipments missed rendezvous points. Ammunition supplies were delayed or lost. Maintenance schedules fell apart. Parts arrived at the wrong stations. Food supplies spoiled in transit. The fleet that had seemed so mighty was revealed as dependent on an impossibly complex supply chain. That supply chain had been managed by human contractors. Gorthak had never even met them. They worked in offices far from the glory of the battlefield, moving cargo and scheduling shipments, boring administrative work that warriors did not concern themselves with. Now Gorthak understood that wars were not won by warriors alone. They were won by the people who made sure warriors had fuel and ammunition and food. Without those people, the mightiest fleet in the galaxy could not even leave port. A border incident erupted with the Thorian Empire, a non-council species that had been testing boundaries for years. Thorian ships crossed into council space expecting the usual forceful response. The council defense fleet scrambled to deploy. Gorthak could only send 1/3 of his fleet. The rest lacked fuel or ammunition or essential crew members who were stranded at other stations. The Thorians, seeing this weakness, pushed further. They captured a council mining colony, then another. They grew bolder. Gorthak was forced to negotiate a temporary ceasefire, something the proud admiral had never done in his long career. Word spread quickly. The council defense fleet was weak, vulnerable. Other species along council borders began making their own calculations. High Counselor Vexith called an emergency session. The Grand Council chamber was full, but the mood was desperate rather than dignified. Counselors shouted over each other, proposing solutions that ranged from reasonable to absurd. "We should hire new contractors," one suggested. "From which species?" another responded. "Everyone is struggling with the same problems. There are no skilled workers available." "We should force the humans to return," a Drakkar counselor growled. "Send the fleet to human space. With what fuel?" Admiral Gorthak asked bitterly. "Our fleet is stranded. And even if we could reach human space, what then? Force them to fix our infrastructure? They would sabotage it. War is not the answer." "Then what is the answer?" Thrin demanded. "My people are dying. We are evacuating an entire planet because we cannot fix one atmospheric processor. What are we supposed to do?" Vexith stood slowly. The chamber quieted. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with a lifetime of pride finally breaking. "We must admit what we have refused to see," he said. "Humanity was never a junior species doing simple labor. They were the foundation of our civilization. We built our society on their backs and called it our achievement. We took their work for granted and dismissed their worth. Now we are paying the price." He picked up Ambassador Kim's withdrawal documentation and held it up for everyone to see. "This document lists everything humans did for us." I dismissed it without reading when she presented it. I thought no species was irreplaceable. I was wrong. Vexith looked around the chamber. "Read this document. All of you. See how deeply humans were woven into every aspect of our lives. Then understand what we must do. We must go to human space not as conquerors or employers, but as supplicants. We must ask for their help, and we must be prepared to give them what we should have given 40 years ago." "What is that?" someone asked. "Respect," Vexith said simply. "Recognition as equals. A place at the table that reflects their value. Humanity did not leave because we did not pay them enough. They left because we never saw them as partners." The council voted to send a delegation to human space. Junior Analyst Kellix, who had tried to warn them from the beginning, was chosen to lead it. Before he left, Vexith met with him privately. "You saw this coming," Vexith said. "You tried to warn us. I apologize for not listening." Kellix nodded, accepting the apology. "What do I tell the humans?" "The truth," Vexith replied. "That we were blind and arrogant. That we mistook their patience for weakness. That we understand now what we failed to understand before. Tell them we need them. But more than that, tell them we see them now." "Really see them? What if they refuse?" Kellix asked. "What if they no longer care about our problems?" Vexith was quiet for a long moment. "Then we will learn the hardest lesson of all, that you cannot undo the past. You can only live with the consequences of your choices." Kellix's ship departed for human space the next day. Behind him, galactic civilization continued its slow collapse. Power grids failed. Water systems broke down. Trade evaporated. Conflicts multiplied. The mighty Galactic Council, thousands of years old, was coming apart. And somewhere in human space, Ambassador Jiwon Kim watched the reports and wondered if they had learned their lesson yet. She had a feeling she was about to find out. Kellix's ship emerged from hyperspace at the edge of human territory. What he saw surprised him. Human space was thriving. Dozens of space stations bustled with activity. Trade ships moved in orderly patterns. Communication signals were clear and strong. Everything that was falling apart in council space worked perfectly here. The contrast was humbling. Humanity had not needed the council. They had built their own civilization, and it was functioning beautifully. Meanwhile, the council that had dismissed them as junior members was collapsing without them. A human patrol ship hailed them. "Council vessel, state your business." "I am Junior Analyst Kellix representing the Galactic Council," he replied. "I request a meeting with Ambassador Jiwon Kim." There was a long pause. "Wait here. We will relay your message." 2 days later, Kellix received clearance to land on New Terra, the administrative center of human space. As his shuttle descended, he watched the planet below. Cities sprawled across continents. Farms stretched between mountain ranges. It was a beautiful world, clearly well-maintained and prosperous. Ambassador Jiwon Kim met him in a simple conference room. She looked older than in her official council portraits, but her eyes were sharp and clear. With her were Chief Engineer Doyen Park, Captain Hyeri Cho, and Dr. Min Ho Yoon, the team that had planned Operation Silent Dawn. "Ambassador Kim," Kellix began, "thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I was curious, G1 said. Her tone was polite but cool. The council ignored 17 messages from High Counselor Vexith. Why should we respond to the 18th? Kellex had prepared for this. He placed a data tablet on the table. Because the situation has become critical. Communication networks are failing. Infrastructure is collapsing. Trade has dropped by 60%. The defense fleet is paralyzed. Species are threatening to leave the council. Without human assistance, galactic civilization will fall apart completely. I know, G1 said calmly. We receive reports. We are watching. The directness surprised Kellex. Then you understand the urgency. The council is prepared to offer full membership, inter-council seats with voting rights, significant economic benefits, access to advanced technologies. Whatever you need. G1 looked at him steadily. Do you understand why we left? Kellex hesitated. Because the council did not adequately compensate you for your contributions? No, G1 said. Money was never the issue. Try again. Because you wanted more political power? No, G1 repeated. Power was not the point either. Kellex struggled to find the right answer. Dr. Yoon leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. We left because after 40 years of essential service, we were still treated as inferior. The council never saw us as partners. We were useful tools. Convenient labor, but not equals. Councillor Thrin compared us to cleaning drones, Yeri added, in front of the entire council. And everyone laughed. We maintained your power grids, Doyen said. We coordinated your trade routes. We resolved your conflicts. We made galactic civilization function. And you dismissed our value without a second thought. G1's expression softened slightly. We did not leave for money or power, Analyst Kellex. We left because we had dignity. And that dignity required us to walk away from people who could not see our worth. Kellex felt the weight of their words. He thought about his own actions during the withdrawal. He had tried to warn the council, but he had also been part of the system that dismissed humans. He had not fought hard enough. You are right, he said quietly. Everything you say is true. The council was blind and arrogant. We mistook your patience for weakness. We took your contributions for granted. And now we are paying the price. He stood and bowed deeply, a gesture of profound respect in Kalar culture. I cannot undo the past, but I can tell you that the council understands now. High Counselor Vexith reads your withdrawal documentation every night. He sees what he missed. We all see it now. We see you now. G1 studied him for a long moment. What exactly is the council offering? Anything you ask, Kellex said. High Counselor Vexith gave me unlimited authority to negotiate. Then I will tell you our terms, G1 said. She pulled up her own data display. First, the council must establish equal representation for all member species. No more junior and senior members. Every species gets equal votes regardless of how old their civilization is. Kellex nodded. Agreed. Second, all essential workers must receive fair compensation and recognition. Engineers, coordinators, mediators, everyone who keeps civilization running. Their voices must be heard in decision-making processes. Agreed, Kellex said. Third, the council charter must be amended to state explicitly that no species is inherently superior to any other. All have value. All deserve respect. This one gave Kellex pause. The council's entire structure was based on the idea that older, more advanced species deserved more authority. Changing that would reshape galactic civilization fundamentally. But he thought about the collapsing infrastructure, the failing trade routes, the paralyzed defense fleet, the pride that had brought them to ruin. Agreed, he said. The negotiations continued for 3 weeks. Humanity did not demand power or wealth. They demanded structural changes that would prevent future dismissal of essential workers. They demanded a council built on cooperation rather than hierarchy. They demanded a civilization that valued all contributions, not just the visible ones. Kellex returned to council space with humanity's terms. The Grand Council chamber was packed for the vote. Some councillors resisted, clinging to traditional privileges. But most understood that they had no choice. Accept the changes or watch civilization collapse completely. High Counselor Vexith stood before the council. We face a choice, he said. We can preserve our pride and lose everything. Or we can admit our mistakes and rebuild on better foundations. I vote to accept humanity's terms. The vote was close, but it passed. The council charter would be amended. The power structure would change. Equality would be enshrined in law. When the news reached New Terra, the human leadership met again. They agreed to everything, Doyen said, looking at the official documents. Equal representation, fair compensation, recognition of essential workers. It is more than we hoped for. Because they are desperate, Harry pointed out. They agree now because they have to. Will they honor these promises once we fix their problems? That is the risk, Jiwon acknowledged. But we will not make it easy for them to backslide. We will return gradually. We will rebuild trust slowly. And if they break their promises, we will leave again. This time they will know exactly what they are losing. The return began carefully. Human engineers went back to critical infrastructure, but as consultants training council personnel, not as invisible maintenance workers. Captain Cho reopened trade coordination, but with proper staff and recognition of their expertise. Dr. Yoon re-established mediation offices, but with council funding and respect for cultural analysis. It took 2 years to stabilize galactic civilization. Systems were repaired, trade routes reopened, conflicts were resolved. The Vrellan homeworld's atmosphere was saved. Power returned to the Kalar capital. The defense fleet became operational again. But things were different now. Everyone knew what had happened. The story of humanity's quiet departure spread across the galaxy. Other species that had been dismissed or undervalued took notice. Workers who had been invisible demanded recognition. The council could no longer take anyone for granted. 1 year after the return began, Ambassador Ji-won Kim stood in the Grand Council chamber for the first time as an equal member of the Inner Council. She looked around the chamber, seeing it from a different perspective now. Not from the lower section where junior members presented requests, but from the center where decisions were made. High Counselor Vexith invited her to speak. Ji-won stood and addressed the assembled representatives. "Thank you for this opportunity to serve alongside you as equals," she began. "The past 3 years have taught all of us important lessons. We learned that civilization is built by many hands and all who contribute deserve respect. We learned that the engineer maintaining a power grid is as vital as the counselor writing policies. We learned that there are no unimportant people in a complex society." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But the most important lesson is this. You cannot wait until you lose something to recognize its value. You must see it, appreciate it, and honor it while it is still here. Because once it is gone, apologies and promises may not be enough to bring it back. Humanity walked away quietly once. We will not do it a second time. Next time, we will make sure everyone understands exactly what they are taking for granted. Consider that our gift to you, a reminder to value what you have before it disappears." The chamber was silent. Then Vexith stood and began to applaud. Slowly, the rest of the council joined him. It was not just applause for Ji-won's speech. It was acknowledgement of everything humans had done and recognition of their equal place in galactic civilization. 5 years later, the changes had become permanent. Council schools taught about the quiet departure as a lesson in recognizing value before it is lost. Monuments appeared on council worlds honoring the human workers who had maintained civilization for decades without recognition.